What did ancient humans do before fire? Imagine for a moment that your electricity suddenly disappears. No lights, no stove, no heater, no hot shower, no microwave, no charging your phone, no coffee machine, no way to reheat last night's food. Within a few hours, most of us would become mildly inconvenienced. Within a few days, many of us would start feeling genuinely miserable. And yet, for almost all of human history, fire didn't exist, or more accurately, humans didn't control it. Because long before campfires, fireplaces, candles, gas stoves, and barbecue grills, our ancestors lived in a world where fire was something that happened to them, not something they could create whenever they wanted. A lightning strike could start one. A wildfire could spread across the landscape. But if the flames went out, that was it. No lighter, no matches, no emergency backup. Which raises a fascinating question. What exactly did humans do before fire? How did they survive cold nights? What did they eat? What happened after sunset? And perhaps most importantly, how different were they from us? Because if you remove fire from human history, you don't just lose warmth. You lose one of the most important technologies ever discovered. In fact, some scientists argue that mastering fire changed humans more than almost any invention that came afterward, including farming, including cities, maybe even including the internet, which sounds ridiculous until you realize how much of your day depends on controlled combustion. Right now, somewhere nearby, something is probably using heat created by fire. Even if you can't see the flames, human civilization is practically built on the idea. But before all of that, there were millions of years without it, and life looked very different. To understand that world, imagine an early human ancestor walking through East Africa around 2 million years ago. The sun is setting, darkness is coming, and unlike modern humans, there is no plan for the evening because evening barely exists. Today, night is almost an extension of the day. We watch movies, play games, scroll social media, order food, argue with strangers online. Ancient humans without fire couldn't do any of that. Once darkness arrived, activity dropped dramatically. Human eyes are actually quite bad in low light compared to many animals. A cat can move confidently through darkness. An owl practically owns the night. Humans? Humans walk into furniture, and that's with modern houses. Imagine doing it in a landscape filled with predators. Darkness was not cozy. Darkness was dangerous. Lions hunted at night. Hyenas moved through the darkness. Leopards often preferred low light conditions. Many animals were simply better equipped for nighttime than humans. Without fire, ancient humans were essentially operating in someone else's territory, which meant one obvious strategy: stay put, find a relatively safe location, stay close to other humans, and wait for morning. Not exactly exciting, but survival rarely is. And this brings us to food. Because if there's one thing most peoples associate with prehistoric life, it's hunting. Big spears, big animals, big meals. But before controlled fire, eating was much less glamorous. Everything had to be consumed raw. Everything. No roasted meat, no grilled fish, no baked roots, no soup, no bread, no toasted marshmallows. which is honestly one of the strongest arguments for inventing fire ever. Imagine spending your entire life eating room temperature food forever, no matter how hungry you are. And it gets worse. Cooking doesn't just make food taste better. Cooking changes food physically. It softens tissues, breaks down fibers, kills many harmful organisms, makes calories easier to access. When humans eventually began cooking, they gained a huge advantage. Scientists have argued that cooked food may have provided more usable energy while requiring less chewing and digestion. Some researchers even believe cooking played a role in the evolution of larger human brains. In other words, your ability to watch YouTube documentaries might indirectly owe something to ancient campfires. Before fire, meals were harder, chewing took longer, digesting took longer, certain foods were less useful, life required more effort, and that's only food. Now imagine winter, or even a cold night. Humans are adaptable, but we're not particularly impressive when it comes to natural insulation. Polar bears have thick fur. Seals have blubber. Humans have questionable fashion choices and optimism. Without fire, staying warm required other solutions: shelter, animal skins, group sleeping, physical closeness. Researchers believe early humans likely relied heavily on social sleeping arrangements, which sounds scientific, and it is. But it also means that if you lived before fire, personal space probably wasn't a thing. Forget king-size beds. Imagine 20 people packed together because freezing was considered a worse option. Suddenly, your annoying roommate doesn't seem so bad. But perhaps the biggest change wasn't physical, it was social. Because fire didn't just provide heat, it created evenings. Think about that. Before fire, darkness ended much of the day's activity. After fire, humans suddenly had extra hours. People could stay awake longer, talk longer, plan longer, share stories longer. Some anthropologists have suggested that campfires may have transformed social life by creating opportunities for conversation and storytelling after sunset. Imagine the first time this happened. Instead of immediately settling into darkness, people gathered around light, faces became visible, voices carried through the night, experiences were shared, knowledge was passed on, stories became entertainment. Entertainment became culture. Culture became civilization. That might sound dramatic, but it may not be far from the truth. Because when researchers compare humans to many other primates, one difference stands out. Humans spend an extraordinary amount of time sharing information, stories, ideas, rumors, advice, warnings, and campfires may have helped make that possible. In a strange way, fire didn't just change what humans ate, it changed what humans talked about. But before that happened, life was quieter, shorter evenings, less activity, fewer opportunities for nighttime socializing, more dependence on daylight, more dependence on natural rhythms. Which raises another interesting question. Were ancient humans miserable before fire? Probably not, because humans adapt surprisingly well. If you've never experienced warm soup, you don't miss warm soup. If you've never sat around a campfire, you don't dream about campfires. You can't miss something that doesn't exist yet. Early humans weren't constantly wishing for lighters. They were simply living within the limits of their world, the same way we live within ours. In fact, if you transported a modern person back before fire, they would probably struggle far more than the people who actually lived there. Because modern humans are adapted to comfort. Ancient humans were adapted to reality, and reality was tougher. Eventually, somewhere in prehistory, humans learned not just to use natural fires, but to maintain them, protect them, carry them, and much later, create them. Once that happened, everything changed. Food changed, sleep changed, safety changed, social life has changed, migration changed. Human evolution itself may have changed. Few discoveries have had such enormous consequences, which is why the question, what did humans do before fire, is really asking something bigger. What were humans like before one of the greatest technologies ever existed? The answer is surprisingly simple. They survived. They adapted. They stayed close to each other. They ate what they could. They avoided the dark as much as possible. And they lived in a world where sunset truly meant something. Because before fire, night belonged to nature. After fire, humans began taking it back. And that small orange glow in the darkness may have been the beginning of everything that came after.
I've been thinking about what you said, about the stars and where they go. Do you think they ever get lonely, just floating